The black Tesla Model S pulled into the parking lot of Lincoln High School with barely a whisper. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt as Keanu Reeves stepped out, adjusting his worn leather jacket against the crisp October air. At 59, the actor still moved with the fluid grace that had made him famous. But today there was something different in his stride, a mixture of nostalgia and nervous energy that hadn't been there in years. He wasn't here for a movie premiere or a charity event. There were no cameras, no entourage, no fanfare. Just a man returning to the place where his story had begun, carrying with him a weight of memories and an unexpected discovery that would change everything. 3 weeks earlier, Keanu had been scrolling through social media, something he rarely did, when a tagged photo caught his attention. It was a grainy image of an elderly man pushing a mop bucket down a familiar hallway, the same green-tiled corridor where Keanu had once hurried between classes, dreaming of becoming an actor while struggling with dyslexia and the typical teenage angst of the 1980s. The caption read, "Mr. Frank Martinez, 80 years old and still keeping Lincoln High spotless after 45 years. This man taught us all about dedication and kindness. Real hero, Lincoln High." Keanu had stared at the screen for a long time, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Frank Martinez. The name brought back a flood of memories so vivid he could almost smell the industrial cleaning solution and hear the gentle humming that always accompanied Frank's work. Frank had been more than just the janitor at Lincoln High. While other adults had written Keanu off as a dreamy kid who'd never amount to much, a hockey player with acting delusions and reading difficulties, Frank had seen something different. During those difficult teenage years when Keanu felt like he didn't belong anywhere, Frank's small acts of kindness had meant everything. "You've got something special, young man," Frank would say whenever he'd catch Keanu practicing lines in empty classrooms. "Don't let anyone tell you different." When Keanu's parents divorced and his world felt like it was crumbling, Frank had always been there with a listening ear and words of encouragement. When bullies made fun of his reading struggles, Frank would remind him that everyone's brain worked differently, and that wasn't something to be ashamed of. Now, decades later, and with a successful career that had brought him fame and fortune, Keanu felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had as a teenager when he realized how much Frank's belief in him had mattered. The fact that Frank was still working at 80 years old stirred something deep within him. The next day, Keanu had called the school. The conversation with Principal Sarah Chen had been illuminating and heartbreaking in equal measure. "Oh, Mr. Martinez is a treasure," she'd said warmly. "He's been here longer than anyone can remember. The students adore him, and honestly, I don't know what we'd do without him." "He's 80 years old," Keanu had said quietly. "Shouldn't he be retired by now?" There had been a pause. "Well, between you and me, I think he keeps working because he needs to. His wife passed away 5 years ago, and his pension isn't, well, it's not much. He lives in a small apartment across town, takes the bus here every day. He's too proud to accept help, says work keeps him young." That conversation had kept Keanu awake for nights. While he'd been building his career, accumulating wealth, and living a life of relative comfort, the man who'd helped shape his early dreams was still mopping floors at an age when he should be enjoying retirement. Now, standing in the school parking lot, Keanu felt the weight of that realization. He'd spent years being grateful for Frank's influence, but gratitude without action was just sentiment. It was time to do something meaningful. The school was exactly as he remembered it, a sprawling brick building that had been built in the 1960s and showed its age in every weathered corner. The same American flag flew out front, the same worn steps led to the main entrance, and the same sense of controlled chaos emanated from within as students moved between classes. Keanu walked through the front doors, the familiar smell of floor wax and teenage energy hitting him immediately. The hallways were different now, brighter, with updated bulletin boards and modern technology, but the essence remained the same. "Can I help you?" The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose, looked up as he approached the main office. "I'm looking for Frank Martinez," Keanu said simply. "I'm an old student." Recognition flickered across her face, but she maintained her professional composure. Mr. Martinez should be finishing up the east wing about now. Down that hallway, take a right, then follow the corridor to the end. Keanu thanked her and started walking, his footsteps echoing in the nearly empty hallway. Classes were in session, so the usual bustle was muted to a gentle hum of activity from behind closed doors. He passed his old locker, his old homeroom, the drama classroom where he'd first discovered his love of acting. Then he heard it, the soft, melodic humming that had been the soundtrack to so many of his memories. Around the corner, pushing a mop bucket with the same steady rhythm Keanu remembered from 35 years ago, was Frank Martinez. Time had bent Frank's shoulders and silvered his hair, but his movements still held that same gentle efficiency. He wore the same style of navy blue uniform, though it hung a bit looser now on his smaller frame. His face, weathered by 8 decades of life, still held the same warmth that had comforted a confused teenager all those years ago. "Excuse me," Keanu said softly, not wanting to startle him. Frank looked up, and for a moment there was no recognition. Then, slowly, his eyes widened. "Keanu?" His voice was raspier than it had been, but still carried that familiar note of gentle surprise. "Keanu Reeves?" "Hello, Frank." Keanu smiled, feeling suddenly like that awkward teenager again. "It's good to see you." Frank leaned on his mop handle, studying Keanu's face as if confirming what his eyes were telling him. "Well, I'll be damned. Look at you." He shook his head in wonder. "I always knew you'd make something of yourself, but this is beyond what even I imagined." They stood there for a moment, two men separated by decades and circumstances, connected by memories and mutual respect. "What are you doing here?" Frank asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Don't tell me you're making a movie at our little school." Keanu laughed. "No, nothing like that. I came to see you, actually." Frank's eyebrows rose. "Me? What for?" "To say thank you," Keanu said simply. "And to catch up. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Frank glanced around the empty hallway, then at his mop bucket. "I suppose I could take a short break. These floors have been here for 50 years. They can wait a few more minutes." They walked to a small alcove with a couple of plastic chairs, the same kind that had been there when Keanu was a student. Frank settled into one with a slight grunt, the sound of joints that had worked hard for 8 decades. "So," Frank said, folding his hands in his lap, "what's this really about, Keanu? You didn't drive all the way out here just to reminisce with an old janitor." Keanu studied Frank's face, seeing the same direct honesty that had always characterized the man. "I heard you were still working. At 80. Frank shrugged. "Keeps me busy. After Maria passed, the house got too quiet. Besides, someone's got to keep these kids in line." He smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Frank," Keanu said gently, "you should be retired. You should be traveling, or spending time with family, or pursuing hobbies. You shouldn't be mopping floors." "There's nothing wrong with honest work," Frank replied, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "I've been doing this job for 45 years, and I'm good at it. These kids need someone who cares about them, someone who sees them as more than just problems to be managed." "You're absolutely right," Keanu agreed. "But you've already given enough. More than enough." Frank was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at Keanu. "What are you getting at, son?" Keanu took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been building toward, the reason he'd driven across town and walked these familiar halls. "I want to set up a fund for you, enough so that you can retire comfortably, pursue whatever makes you happy, maybe do some traveling if you want." Frank's reaction was immediate and firm. "No." "Frank." "No, Keanu. I appreciate the thought, I really do. But I don't take charity. Never have, never will." "It's not charity," Keanu insisted. "It's gratitude. Do you remember what you told me when I was 17 and convinced I'd never make it as an actor?" Frank's expression softened slightly. "I told you that everyone's brain works differently, and that your reading troubles didn't define your intelligence or your potential. You told me that believing in yourself was the first step to getting others to believe in you," Keanu continued. "You told me that kindness was more important than talent, and that success without integrity was just an elaborate failure." I remember. Those words changed my life, Frank. They literally changed the trajectory of everything that came after. When I was struggling in auditions, when directors dismissed me, when I felt like giving up, I heard your voice telling me to keep going. Frank's eyes were glistening now, but he remained silent. You invested in me when I had nothing to offer in return, Keanu continued. You saw potential in a confused kid that nobody else saw. You gave me something more valuable than money. You gave me belief in myself. Now I want to give something back. Keanu, I didn't do anything special. I just treated you like a human being. Exactly. Keanu leaned forward. You treated a struggling teenager with dignity and respect when others didn't. You took time out of your day to encourage someone who felt invisible. You made me feel like I mattered. That's not just anything, Frank. That's everything. Frank wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You would have made it anyway. You had the talent and the determination. Maybe, but I wouldn't have had the confidence to keep going when things got tough. I wouldn't have had the voice in my head reminding me that I was worth something when the world seemed determined to prove otherwise. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared history settling between them. Besides, Keanu added with a gentle smile, you're still doing it. I talked to Principal Chen. She told me how you connect with the students here, how you're often the first person to notice when a kid is struggling. You're still changing lives. Frank, you're still making a difference. These kids today, Frank said, shaking his head, they face challenges we never imagined. Social media, pressure to be perfect, constant comparison to others. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them that they're not alone. Which is exactly what you did for me, Keanu said, and exactly why you deserve to choose how you spend your remaining years, instead of being forced to work because you have to. Frank was quiet for a long time, considering. Finally he spoke. What did you have in mind? A foundation, Keanu said. The Frank Martinez Foundation. It would provide scholarships for students who face learning challenges, like I did. It would fund programs that support kids who feel like they don't fit in, and it would ensure that you never have to worry about financial security again. Frank stared at him. A foundation? With my name on it? Your name, your mission, your legacy, Keanu confirmed. You've been changing lives one student at a time for 45 years. Imagine what we could do if we scaled that up. I don't know anything about running a foundation, Frank protested. You don't have to run it. You just have to be the inspiration behind it. There are people who handle the administrative side. Your job would be to help identify the kids who need support, to be the face of the foundation, to continue doing what you've always done, just on a bigger scale. Frank was shaking his head, but Keanu could see he was considering it. This is too much, Keanu. Too generous. It's not generous enough, Keanu replied. Frank, I've made more money than I'll ever need. Houses, cars, investments. None of that matters compared to the impact you had on my life. This isn't about money. It's about making sure your legacy continues long after you're gone. My legacy? The students you've encouraged, the lives you've touched, the belief you've instilled in kids who thought they were worthless. That's a legacy worth preserving and expanding. Frank stood up slowly, walking to the window that looked out over the school courtyard. Students were starting to emerge for lunch, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I've watched thousands of kids walk through these halls, he said quietly. Seen them struggle, seen them succeed, seen them fail and get back up again. Every single one of them taught me something. And you taught them something too, Keanu said, joining him at the window. The question is, are you ready to teach even more? Frank turned to look at him. You're serious about this? The foundation, the retirement fund, all of it. Completely serious. And if I say no, then I respect your decision, but the offer stands whenever you're ready. Frank studied Keanu's face, seeing the same earnest determination that had characterized the teenager he remembered. You really credit me with helping your career? Frank, I credit you with helping me believe I could have a career. That's the difference between success and failure. Not talent, not luck, but the fundamental belief that you're worth something. You gave me that gift when I needed it most. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the students below. Finally, Frank spoke. There's a kid here now, he said. Marcus, 15 years old, smart as a whip, but he's got autism and the other kids don't understand him. He spends lunch period in the library because he doesn't have anyone to sit with. Reminds me of you, actually. Different reasons, same loneliness. Keanu nodded, understanding where this was leading. If I were to say yes to this foundation, Frank continued, could we help kids like Marcus? Could we create programs that don't just give them money, but give them community? We could do whatever you think would help the most, Keanu assured him. You've been working with these kids for 45 years. You know what they need better than anyone. Frank was quiet for another long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Partners? Keanu grasped it firmly. Partners. The next several weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Keanu's team of lawyers and financial advisors worked with Frank to establish the foundation, setting up an endowment that would ensure its longevity. The initial funding was substantial enough to provide scholarships, support programs, and ensure Frank's comfortable retirement, with additional funds earmarked for expansion. But the most important work happened in the quiet moments. Keanu spent hours with Frank, learning about the students he'd worked with over the years, understanding the challenges facing today's teenagers, and developing programs that would address real needs rather than assumed ones. They decided on three main initiatives: scholarship funding for students with learning differences, mentorship programs that connected struggling students with successful adults who'd faced similar challenges, and community-building activities that helped isolated students find their tribes. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning in November. Principal Chen had called a special assembly, telling the students only that they were going to hear about an exciting new opportunity. The auditorium was packed, buzzing with the kind of anticipatory energy that only a room full of teenagers could generate. When Frank walked onto the stage, the students erupted in applause. He was beloved by every kid in the school, and seeing him in the spotlight brought genuine joy to their faces. But when Keanu followed him onto the stage, the applause turned to stunned silence, then to excited whispers that built to a roar. Settle down, Principal Chen said into the microphone, but she was smiling. We have some very special guests today. Frank stepped up to the microphone first, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined. Most of you know me as the guy who cleans up after you, he began, getting a laugh from the audience. But today I'm here to talk about something different. I'm here to talk about potential. He went on to tell them about the foundation, about the programs it would fund, about the opportunities it would create. But mostly he talked about them, about their worth, their potential, their right to dream big regardless of the challenges they faced. When Keanu took the microphone, the auditorium fell completely silent. 35 years ago, he began, I sat in seats just like yours, feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. I struggled in school, I was awkward socially, and I had this crazy dream of becoming an actor that most people thought was ridiculous. He told them about Frank, about the impact of having one adult who believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. He talked about the importance of perseverance, of kindness, of seeing beyond surface differences to recognize the unique value in every person. Mr. Martinez didn't just clean these hallways, Keanu concluded. He created an environment where dreams could grow. The Frank Martinez Foundation is our way of making sure that environment exists for generations of students to come. The response was overwhelming. Students lined up after the assembly to talk to Frank, to thank him, to share their own stories of how his kindness had impacted them. Teachers and staff members wiped away tears as they heard story after story of Frank's quiet acts of compassion. But the real magic happened in the weeks that followed. Applications for the Foundation's programs poured in, not just from Lincoln High, but from schools across the district as word spread. Students who had felt invisible began to find their voices. Kids who had been struggling alone discovered they weren't alone after all. Marcus, the autistic student Frank had mentioned, was among the first to benefit from the mentorship program. He was paired with a successful software engineer who had also been on the autism spectrum and had faced similar social challenges in school. For the first time in his high school career, Marcus had someone who understood his experience and could guide him toward his goals. 3 months after the Foundation's launch, Keanu returned to Lincoln High for a quiet visit. he found Frank in the same alcove where they'd had their initial conversation. But this time, Frank was wearing civilian clothes instead of his janitor's uniform. "How's retirement treating you?" Keanu asked, settling into the familiar plastic chair. Frank smiled. "It's strange, not having a mop in my hands every day, but I'm busier than ever. 3 foundation meetings this week, 2 school visits, and a scholarship committee review. Who knew retirement would be so much work?" "Having second thoughts?" "Not for a minute," Frank replied firmly. "We've already helped over 100 students in just 3 months, Keanu. 100 kids who might have fallen through the cracks. That's more than I could have helped in years of mopping floors." "You were helping them before," Keanu reminded him, "just in a different way." "True, but now we're helping them systematically, strategically. We're not just fixing individual problems, we're changing the system that creates those problems in the first place." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of a school day in progress. Finally, Frank spoke again. "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For seeing me," Frank said simply. "For remembering. For caring enough to come back. Most people, they move on with their lives and forget the people who helped them along the way. You didn't forget." "I could never forget you, Frank. You changed my life." "We changed each other's lives," Frank corrected. "That's what real relationship is, mutual transformation." As Keanu prepared to leave, Frank walked him to the front entrance. The hallways were full of students now, changing classes with the organized chaos that had characterized Lincoln High for generations. But something was different. The students seemed more engaged, more hopeful. Several stopped to greet Frank warmly, updating him on their scholarship applications or mentorship meetings. "You know what the best part is?" Frank said as they reached the door. "What's that?" "The ripple effect. These kids we're helping now, they're going to go out into the world and help others. The kindness multiplies, the belief spreads, the impact grows. We're not just changing individual lives, we're changing the culture." Keanu smiled, seeing the same visionary thinking that had inspired him as a teenager. "You always were a philosopher, Frank." "Just an old janitor who paid attention," Frank replied with a grin. As Keanu drove away from Lincoln High that day, he reflected on the journey that had brought him back to this place. Success in Hollywood, wealth, fame, all of it paled in comparison to the satisfaction of giving back to the man who had given him so much. But more than that, he realized this wasn't really about paying back a debt. It was about recognizing that we all have Frank Martinez figures in our lives. People whose small acts of kindness, whose moments of belief, whose quiet encouragement shape us in ways we might not even realize until years later. The Frank Martinez Foundation continued to grow, eventually expanding beyond Lincoln High to serve schools across the state. Frank became a sought-after speaker, sharing his philosophy of seeing potential in every student, of treating every interaction as an opportunity to plant seeds of confidence and hope. Keanu remained involved, but always in the background, insisting that Frank be the face and voice of the foundation. This was Frank's legacy, Frank's vision, Frank's impact expanding into the world. Years later, when asked about the foundation in interviews, Keanu would always redirect the conversation to Frank's wisdom and influence. He would talk about the importance of remembering the people who believed in us before we believed in ourselves, and the responsibility that comes with success to lift others up. But perhaps the most powerful testament to the foundation's impact came from an unexpected source. 5 years after its launch, a young woman named Sarah approached Keanu at a charity event in Los Angeles. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves," she said nervously. "I wanted to thank you for the Frank Martinez Foundation." "You don't need to thank me," Keanu replied gently. "That's all Frank's work." "Well, I wanted to thank both of you," she continued. "I was one of the first scholarship recipients. I had severe anxiety and panic attacks in high school, and I was failing most of my classes. The foundation didn't just give me money for college. It gave me a mentor who understood what I was going through and support programs that helped me manage my anxiety. I graduate from MIT next month with a degree in computer science." Keanu smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that came with these encounters. "That's wonderful. Frank would be so proud." "He is proud," Sarah laughed. "I still email him every few months. He's like the grandfather I never had." But I wanted to tell you something else. I'm starting my own nonprofit when I graduate. It's going to focus on mental health support for teenagers. I learned from the best, from both of you, that success isn't just about what you achieve, but about how you use your achievements to help others. As Sarah walked away, Keanu felt a profound sense of completion. The circle was expanding, just as Frank had predicted. The kindness was multiplying, the belief was spreading, the impact was growing beyond anything they had imagined. That night, he called Frank to share the encounter. "You know what this means, don't you?" Frank said after hearing the story. "What's that?" "It means we're not just changing individual lives anymore. We're changing the world, one student at a time." Keanu thought about that conversation as he drove home through the Los Angeles night. The city sprawled endlessly in all directions, millions of people pursuing their dreams, struggling with their challenges, hoping for their chance at something better. Somewhere in that vast cityscape were teachers and janitors and coaches and counselors, people whose names would never be in lights, but whose impact would ripple through generations. People like Frank Martinez, who understood that the most important work isn't always the most visible work, and that the most powerful gift you can give someone is the belief that they matter. The Frank Martinez Foundation had started as a simple gesture of gratitude from a successful actor to a retired janitor, but it had become something much larger, a testament to the transformative power of seeing potential in others, of believing in people before they believe in themselves, of understanding that true success isn't measured by what you achieve, but by how you use your achievements to lift others up. And in the quiet moments before sleep, Keanu often found himself thinking about the 17-year-old version of himself, struggling with dyslexia and self-doubt, practicing lines in empty classrooms, and dreaming of impossible things. That young man couldn't have imagined the life that lay ahead, couldn't have predicted the success and recognition that would come. But he might have understood even then that the most important moment in his journey wasn't when he landed his first role, or when he achieved financial success, or when he became famous. The most important moment was when a humble janitor took time out of his day to tell a confused teenager that he mattered, that he had something special, that he shouldn't let anyone tell him different. Everything else, all the success, all the acclaim, all the achievements, was just the natural consequence of that fundamental act of human kindness. And now, through the foundation, that kindness was multiplying exponentially, creating a legacy that would outlast any movie, any career, any individual life. In the end, Keanu realized that was the true meaning of success, not what you accomplish for yourself, but what you make possible for others. Not the heights you reach, but the hands you extend to help others climb. Not the recognition you receive, but the recognition you give to those who helped you along the way. Frank Martinez had understood this all along. It had taken Keanu Reeves decades to catch up, but now that he was determined to spend the rest of his life paying forward the gift he had received from a humble janitor who saw potential in a struggling teenager and chose to nurture it rather than ignore it. The circle was complete, but it was also just beginning. And somewhere in a high school hallway, a new generation of students was learning that they mattered, that they had potential, that someone believed in them, even when they couldn't believe in themselves. The legacy of Frank Martinez lived on, one life at a time, one dream at a time, one act of kindness at a time. And that, perhaps, was the most stunning move of all.